Good morning. Today, I am happy to welcome you to Living a Legacy Life. As you know, we talk about legacy every week, and thank you for coming with us. And today we have Jennifer Dukesley, who we had a couple years ago, and so it's really fun when we have a repeat. And I want you to go back. I'll link her other podcast in the show notes so that you can hear about her last great book, Growing Slow. I believe that was the name.
That's
And
correct.
and I just want to ask you, audience, if as you enjoy these each week, if you wouldn't mind sharing the podcast with your friends and maybe your enemies. It could help an enemy make into a friend, I would think, especially when you're talking to someone like Jennifer, especially when we talk about this book today. Oh, you're just going to be delighted. And also, please take the time to leave a review, and that helps me and this podcast. So, Jennifer Dukesley, you are a mother of two girls, right? So, we're sort of related that way. And you live in Iowa, and my husband's from Iowa. So, would we just, in case people don't know you yet, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, where you're from, and your ministry. And then you are the author of 7 books. So, Jennifer, welcome once again.
This is so fun, and I love the theme of your podcast. I have a heart for that. So I'm excited to get
Oh,
to talk some about legacy. That's such a
oh,
great
great.
theme. I'd forgotten that. We're trying to build a legacy here on a farm. This is a legacy farm. We have been
Wow.
farming since 1870. Not we ourselves, we're not that old, but it's a fifth generation, 5 generations of Lees. So 5 years
Wow.
after the Civil War, the first of the Lees were farming here, and more than likely we will be the last because we don't have somebody in the family that's interested in farming. But that is our life. Our day-to-day life is life on the farm. Scott grows corn and soybeans, and we raise pigs as well.
Fun.
But while Scott's planting seeds, I'm planting seeds with words. And I have been writing ever since I was a little girl. I used to be a newspaper reporter, and now I'm the author of several books, Bible studies, a journal that we'll be talking about later. I'm also an acquisitions editor for a company called Baker Publishing Group, and the division is Bethany House Publishers. So about half of my work week vocationally is spent mentoring other authors and helping them put good Christian books out into the world. And I get a lot of joy out of that work. It's the quieter side of my work life,
Hmm.
not the more, public part of my ministry, but I really thoroughly enjoy the work. And also, we have 2 daughters and we are empty nesters now. So we're adjusting to that.
It is an adjustment.
So, when you have adult children, you do start to think about legacy more. And I think too, just like both Scott and I hit that 50 mark recently. And we were meeting with our financial planner, and he says, oftentimes people there is a shift that happens. And
Mhm.
so, my dad just died, and we have an empty nest, and we turned 50, and all those things have us really thinking about what kind of legacy do we want to leave, what is most important. So I really just appreciate your focus on legacy on this
Mm.
podcast, and I'm really, really grateful to be here.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's something I think it takes a major shift in our lives, whether it's empty nesting or an illness or a death or moving, even for us to I think to shake up our normal day to day. Because when we're raising kids, as I recall, it's just so much. You just move to the next schedule, to the next thing, to the next mini crises or huge crises, and you don't have time to reflect. And so maybe that's why I started this, because this is my going into my 5th year of talking to people about their legacy. And I just talked to 2 29-year-olds and I thought, okay, you're already thinking about legacy. Good for you. And, and it's huge. It's huge that we do it now, right now, because otherwise you don't want to waste that time. And of course you didn't, and you are continuing not to. We're going to talk today about your latest book, which is really a guided journal. Could you give us the title, please? Because it's kind of lengthy.
Yes, it's called Stuff I'd Only Tell God. And the subtitle is A Guided Journal of Courageous Honesty, Obsessive Truth Telling, and Beautifully Ruthless Self Discovery.
Wow.
It is a lot, but I dreamed that up, Sue. We were watching Netflix one night. I was on the couch. I'm just like, what do I call this thing? And we had a really boring subtitle on it. And publisher didn't think it was right, and I didn't think it was right. And I was just like, what is this thing really? What do we want people to feel and experience? And that just, it kind of came along. I'm like, Scott, pause the show. I got to tell you this. And so that's how it was born. But it is a mouthful, but it's super fun and intriguing, I think.
It is, and the font is so cute as well. I
It
just love
is.
the brightness of the cover. I'm going to repeat it for my audience. Stuff I'd only tell God. And when I told a friend I was interviewing an author of that book, she just went, "Wow!" Like she obviously needed the book when she heard the title. Stuff I'd only tell God: a guided journal of courageous honesty, obsessive truth telling, and beautifully ruthless self discovery. Why do we need this book, and who is it for?
We need this book because, first of all, if you just think about journaling in general, and I know but journaling is a very therapeutic
Yes,
practice. Counselors and therapists will tell you that you need to journal what you're feeling and what you're experiencing and where your areas of growth are. I'm not a counselor or a therapist, but I know enough about journaling to know that indeed it produces healing.
it's
And
so true,
it
so true.
does.
Mhm.
And the other thing it does for a Christian is when we journal, I think we journal differently than the world does, because while we're, unloading our thoughts, I feel for most Christians I know who journal, we're also talking to God. It's a way of bearing our souls before God, or even prioritizing things with God. There are gratitude journals and prayer journals and scripture journals and all kinds of journals. And this is those things, all of those things, but it's also more. The journal is really aimed at helping you get to know yourself better and to become more intimate with God and honest before Him. People are often like, well, doesn't He already know anyway? True enough, true enough. But so, in the same way, as an analogy, when my husband comes home at night from the barns, he knows me very well, and he can tell by my body language, and because he knows me for all these years, what I'm feeling and maybe what struggles I'm having and how my day was been. But that's not enough. We need to talk to each other about it. Yes, he knows already. Scott
Mhm.
knows already what I'm going through, but he doesn't know fully, of course, because he's not God. But there would not be a good relationship if I didn't share with him. And the same is true, even more so, with God. There's not an intimacy with God if we just say, you know what, God, I already know you know my thoughts, but we're just going to leave it at that because I really don't want to talk to you about it. That's
Mm.
not the way He intends for our relationship to be. So my hope with this journal is that it would take people on a journey to see where God has been all along in their lives, and trusting more that He will be there for them in the future. And also, there's a lot of stuff in here that helps you embrace kind of like your weird, wonderful self. There's so many like really quirky questions in the journal. It's not all serious. It's not all like, oh my goodness, I have to dig deep into my past and deal with all this stuff. There is some of that, but there's also just a lot of really fun things in the journal that I hope will bring people joy and remind people that God has a sense of humor, and that
Totally.
like God created us so uniquely and beautifully. And I want people to get to that point too.
Mm. While you're talking, it reminded me of a story. My brother, when he was on the mission field, it was head of an office, and at lunchtime, everybody would leave the office, but he would stay and fast at lunch, every lunch. I thought, wow. And he goes, and one time, God told me that He was proud of me. And I thought, wow, he wouldn't have heard that if he hadn't sat still long enough to hear it. And we don't hear what our hearts are really saying or feeling until we sit still long enough, maybe even to write it down. And so this is a great guided journal. I like this line: think of it as your own confessional booth. Can this book replace therapy? I'm sorry, but that was one of my questions. I mean, if you don't have $150 an hour to go see a therapist this week, buy this book.
Yes, it's like only $16 on Amazon right
There
now.
we go.
And no, I mean, obviously it doesn't replace
Mhm.
therapy, but I already have, in just the 2 months this thing has been out, therapists telling me I'm going to be using this with my
Isn't that a
clients. So it's
blessing?
really, really cool to
You
see
should
that.
you should send it to the Christian colleges that have biblical counseling as a major.
It's a
Just
good idea.
send them a free copy from we'll have your editor do that, and just say this might be something, especially the ones who are just starting out. the counselor. My daughter's an MFT. That's why I was thinking that would be great. You refer to two virtues at the very beginning: ruthless honesty and generous compassion. Why those particular two? And just explain that, why you put that in there.
So ruthless honesty first. I think that is really critical. I know in my own journey toward faith, I grew up in the church. We did all the churchy things, but I had deep intellectual doubt that had to be worked out over years with the Lord before I came to a saving faith. I was kind of, I guess, agnostic, for lack of a better word, because I just couldn't believe it. And only when I got ruthlessly honest with myself and with God, and began to, sort of interrogate the Bible, I guess, did I come to a saving faith. So honesty was the way to Jesus for me. And I found that he was so welcoming of it, in the same way that he was so welcoming of Thomas and his doubts. Like, I was doubting Jennifer. And I feel like Jesus was saying, well, here's my nail scars, and here's my side. You can see that I am who I say I am. And so that brought me to a place of faith. And I think being ruthlessly honest about our past is really, really important. And ruthlessly honest about what we want our futures to be is so important to help us get on the path that we want to be going down for the rest of our lives.
Jennifer, haven't you met people who have been just as ruthlessly honest about their questions of God and have decided to turn the opposite way? In their honesty, they didn't come to the conclusion that God was real.
Yes, but they're not right. They didn't dig enough. I'm sorry.
They didn't ask enough questions.
Yeah, I mean, they may have come to that conclusion, but there is, in my view now, I used to think I was too smart to be a Christian, and now I realize I'm too smart not to be one. Like, that would be really foolish. And so I think I would just encourage people to continue knocking and to continue seeking and look at prophecy and see how the whole story ties together and how it can't be anything but real. And so I have no doubt that people have studied and come to a different conclusion. I just don't happen to think that's the right conclusion based on who God says he is.
I went through a terrible time of doubt for about a year and a half in college. And I remember finally telling my favorite professor, I said, Mr. Hills, I have doubts. And it just killed me to have to say that. And he said, well, Sue, if God isn't big enough for our questions, then he's not a big enough God, is he?
So
and
good.
He has no recollection of saying that. I said, that practically saved my life, just that one sentence.
That's so good.
There's the whole thing about being honest with someone that you can trust. And certainly you can trust a journal. So the other thing I was asking you about, the other virtue, is why generous compassion? Is that compassion with yourself? Is that what you mean?
Both. So you will come to the end of this journal and undoubtedly have more compassion toward yourself and more compassion toward your past self, especially, and more compassion toward other people, even the people who've hurt you. So it's like this. For instance, there's a letter in there where you write to your 10 years ago self. And there's a lot of pages where you think through things of your past. And when I got to that letter and answered it myself, I realized that I didn't look back and resent younger me. I looked back and I felt an admiration for her. Like, I am who I am now because of who she was then, the decisions that younger Jennifer made, the mistakes that Jennifer made, the risks. My goodness, some of the things I look back on younger versions of myself, I'm like, wow, that was so cool that you did that. I mean, there are things that I feel like now I might not feel that I could do. Would I have the courage to do some things now that I did in the past? And so in this way, I'm looking back now at my younger self with more compassion than I did beforehand. Because when I've reflected on previous versions of myself in the past, it's just kind of a passing glance of just seeing, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, or,
regret. And now I have a sense of admiration and love and tenderness toward that person. And I think, not toward every person of my past do I have a
Yeah.
great deal of compassion for, particularly those who were, potentially abusive or caused traumatic events in my life. But I am able to move forward in more wholeness having done that. And I also think, like there's a section where you talk about like you think about your parents and your grandparents, and it has helped me think more compassionately about why my parents and grandparents are the way that they are, and why they made the decisions they made to raise me and into the woman that I am now. And it changes my outlook on just a lot of relationships in my life.
Mhm. We are so quick to judge when we're young. And I think a part of that is just our age, that we've gone, wow, I've made so many mistakes. I'm a lot more compassionate towards other people, And I had this, oh, let's see, how old was she? 31-year-old for coffee last week. And she just started off by saying something. And I just said, that's very judgmental. And I didn't even know her. And she goes, you're right, it is. But, it's easier for me to catch it because I was that person. And the more fault I see in myself, I can be compassionate because God is with my sin. But realize I just love it that you went through that whole process and that you could admire your younger self. I think that's a beautiful thing. Um, why do you write it takes courage to be vulnerable? Aren't we past all the angst of junior high and insecurities of past failures at our age? I mean, I'm 20 years older than you, but aren't we past that? Why do we still have to struggle with comparison issues and well, even regrets? Why
We're
does it
not
take?
past it.
Ah,
At least this one isn't. Maybe I'm the only one
no,
in
no,
the
I'm
above
not either.
50 crowd, but I mean, to be that level of vulnerable with other people, and to say, look, here are my flaws and here are my scars and here are my wounds. It's really, well, first of all, I think it seems hard to find people who will receive that at times. I think in friendships, I have a handful of friends that I feel like I can be that
Mhm.
vulnerable with.
Agree.
um Over time, we've been vulnerable, and we have felt the sting of rejection.
Mm,
We just have. I mean, in junior high, but it stings when you're 45 years old too, and you're having trouble with your teenage kids, and there is some level of judgment that can come, for instance, from other moms.
sure.
And in workplaces we experience it, and in our careers as authors we experience it, seeing maybe success, the kind of success that we've wanted with our own books. We see somebody else living that out that's maybe 20 or 30 years younger even, and feel
Yep.
like I've been doing this forever, and
Right.
what? So I mean, all of those things are real, and my goal with the journal then is to take that, instead of just stuffing it down and not dealing with it, to take that to the pages of the journal, and in essence to take that before God and say, here's some areas where I'm feeling insecure, here are some areas where I'm struggling with comparison, here's where I'm dealing with anger, here's where I'm dealing with deep sadness and heartbreak. All of those kinds of soul searching questions are inside of the journal, and I take you on the journey to unveil all those and put them before the Lord, which I think is really important.
I don't know how you came up with so many questions. I mean, every page I thought, oh, that's a good one. And I've written a book, 252 conversation starters. So I'm kind of into this world
I did
of,
not know
oh, it's
that.
so much fun. I started with 202 just because it was cute and did it digitally. And then my daughter goes, no, you need to have a book because, oh no, my mentor said you need to have a small book. So now I built it up to 252, divided into things like were kids asking kids questions, because you can train your kids to be good conversationalists with adults or with their friends when they're young, and then Christian questions as well as secular ones, because I have wine nights where people are not believers, and most of them, and so I always do two questions. One is to get them to get acquainted, and then the second one is to get it to a deeper level. For instance, I'll say, "What did you want to be when you were younger? When you grew up?" You probably have that question in your book, and yeah, you do, because I recognize it. And it was hilarious to hear the answers. And then I said, and who are you becoming now? So then it becomes to a deeper level. And then friendships are made from it. And then it's just great. So yeah, I've been into conversation starters, but you went way beyond what I have done. And I'm not feeling small. I just think it's exciting. And, but I had a few favorite ones. there are some that made me cringe, like, oh, I don't think I really want to answer that. So speaking of courage, um, one was I would hate it if this person got their hands on this journal. That was
My
a great
kids,
question.
my kids is undoubtedly what I wrote down in mine. And I, in fact, have a pact with my best friend. Get over here. If I die before you, get over here and burn these things. And
Yeah,
this is where they're
yeah,
hidden.
yeah,
And then I've got this,
yeah.
I have charge of hers as well. So
I've thrown out some journals just in case that happens. I love the whole page 31. Oh, let's see. I vow to do better. Oh, that was such a good page. Let me read that. I don't have my reading glasses on.
yeah, it's got a whole list of how you vow to do better with the people in your life.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
so good. But in what ways to do better?
Yeah,
That's
so on that page
so
has a
good.
number of choices for people
Yeah.
to answer. So you could add your own if you wanted to, but a few that I put on there were like forgiving more, going
Right.
first, being kinder, putting my phone down,
hmm
offering the gift of touch. So did you see any of those,
I
Sue,
put,
that you were like,
I put assuming others have good intentions because I'm married to a person who doesn't talk in general. And so if he would hurt me like early on in our marriage, I would have to think through that he didn't mean to, he just didn't get it. So when I would say, I know you didn't mean to do this, so I'm assuming the best. And usually that was the case. He's oblivious. He's brilliant in some areas, but not particularly in that one. And so that's just a way to show love and to do better is to always believe the best because that's straight out of scripture, 1 Corinthians 13. I love showing gratitude, of course, giving people the benefit of the doubt. What did you mean? Lightening up, not taking things so seriously.
that's exactly right. Yes.
That's a great one. Like just get over yourself is not a nice way of saying it. Admitting I'm wrong. Oh my gosh, when I could say that to Mario, guess what? I was wrong. And Mark just sort of lights up. So to vow to do better with the people in my life, that was certainly one of my favorites.
I have one of the two that I've been thinking about a lot lately in my own journal is the very last one on that page. I vow to do better by offering the gift of touch.
mm,
I feel like since COVID, when we stopped hugging each other
right.
and touching each other and no more
Mhm.
passing the peace, um, I'm more resistant to move forward with like touching an arm or
Yeah,
giving a hug, even
right.
to somebody who clearly needs it. And so I obviously want to respect people's boundaries, but
Right.
I do feel like I'm missing it. And I feel like people around me are missing the gift of touch.
Mhm. One of my favorite prompts was, well, actually, I wanted to say about that page 31. People should buy it just for that page, but you could have had a chapter on each one of those things, just like what you just said. You just said that thing about COVID. I still have to say, oh, are we hugging? When I walk into someone's home, because even though it's been over for a while, it's not for some people.
That's right.
It's
That's
not for
right.
some people. That's right.
Absolutely.
Um, my favorite was on a hard day, this is how I know God loves me. I thought that was a great prompt.
Yes.
Give us three of your favorites. Can you off
Of
the
my
top of
favorite
your
questions,
Yeah.
um, I like the whole section called Conversations with Jesus.
Oh, me too.
And there's about 12 different prompts or something like that in the section. So what I did in Conversations with Jesus is I went through the Gospels and looked at all of the questions that Jesus asked people, often right before he healed them or in the midst of something really
Mhm.
cool that was happening in the Gospels. And he was pretty provocative with some of his questions.
Yeah.
And so I listed many of my favorite questions and then leave space for you as the journaler to answer. So, for instance, you would think about one of the questions is, do you want to get well?
Mhm.
And so then in your own life context, if Jesus were in the room, like how would you answer that? Or another one of my favorite in that section is, why did you doubt?
Oh, yeah.
From Matthew 14:31. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I realized as I wrote the questions down into the manuscript and as I answered them myself is that for most of my life, when I've read the questions in the Bible, I've read them with a certain kind of a tone, like Jesus being like, why did you doubt? like scolding almost.
Mm-hmm.
But when I began to explore the questions and look at them in more context in the verses and then answer them myself,
Mm-hmm.
I hear now in my mind a kindness and compassion from Jesus. Like, why did you doubt? Like, I almost feel like him embracing me, like, come on, honey, you didn't have to doubt me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really cool shift for me in that section. Um, there's another section that I think is really fun at the end where you talk about all of the things that you're dreaming about. Like, I dream of learning how, I dream of getting to know, I dream of being able to afford, I dream of reuniting with,
Mm-hmm.
I dream of getting over. It's like this whole thing, like, just it helps you look forward with a hopefulness and to dream again. Because honestly, Sue, a lot of people have a hard time dreaming
Yeah.
because of the fear of disappointment.
Right.
And so these pages in the dream section help you to look forward with hopefulness and write it down, and maybe that you will gain the courage to get after it, whatever that happens to be. And then just like the whole lost in translation section is maybe one of my favorite. Yeah, it is definitely one of my
It was
favorites.
very unusual. I was going to ask you about that. How did you even come up with that? Explain to the audience what we're
Well,
talking about.
okay, so there's a section, three different sections in the journal called
Right.
Lost in Translation.
Mm-hmm.
And I explained to the journaler that the English language has a lot of really cool words, like thousands of them, but sometimes there isn't a perfect, succinct English word for whatever we're feeling. And so I went to our friends around the world in other languages and found words that have no English equivalents.
Oh,
And
how
I
did you do
put,
that? How did you find the words?
well, I knew one. I actually knew two, but there's one that's not in there. And but one that I knew for sure was saudade, and it's a Portuguese word
Oh,
that
I know
speaks of a
that word.
longing,
It's
right?
homesickness. Yeah,
Yes,
and yeah, eu
but it's
felt
a deeper one, right? And you
yeah,
because you know
saudade.
Portuguese,
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
when I was a first grader, I learned that word because we had a an exchange student from Brazil, and she
Mm,
taught me that word, and I felt it as a first grader when we said goodbye, because she was like my sister. I still
yes.
even cry,
Yeah, I can
because
hear
she was
it.
so special. So there's that feeling you have,
Mm-hmm.
and there's homesickness doesn't even do it justice. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the words in there is saudade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just began to um, collect the words. I mean, I would see them. There was one word that was in Book Thief, and I can't remember what the word is, but that made it in there. You've probably heard of wabi sabi. People talk about wabi sabi, and it's a Japanese word that's finding and appreciating beauty in imperfection.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, that it took a long time just looking online and finding words and talking to people from other languages, Googling, and came up with a few that I really, really loved,
And the point being, well, in your
just to
book,
have fun. Yeah.
no,
I
in,
mean, because I want people to think about who they have saudade for.
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
want people to think about, wabi sabi and what is something that they can find in a beauty and appreciation for something that's imperfect. That's important to do. I want people to laugh at whoever the guitarra is in their life. And a guitarra is an Italian word. It's reserved for women who take care of a lot of cats. So like, my best
yeah,
my
I
best
wrote someone's
friend.
name down.
Okay. And so, I mean, it's just fun. It's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't have to have a deep and meaning. Some of them are pretty deep and meaningful. There's a word called Kummerspeck in there.
Mm.
And Kummerspeck is a German word, and it literally translates to grief bacon. So like eating bacon from grief. And it's a term that is used to describe weight gained due to emotional overeating. Now that,
Wow.
yeah. So Kummerspeck might be something that's really humorous, or it
Yeah.
might, you might approach that question and cry. Like you might have
Mm-hmm,
this moment of, oh my gosh, after a child died, maybe you
mm-hmm,
gained a bunch of weight because you were so sad. I mean, I
mm-hmm,
have no idea
mm-hmm,
what people are going to feel. And so some of the questions in there, I don't know. Like I
mm-hmm.
keep telling people, I didn't launch my book, I launched yours, because
Oh, that's so great.
it's only really going to come to the fullness of what the book is intended to be when you approach it. And it's everybody's book is going to end up different.
That's for sure. Yeah, and I don't want anybody reading mine. You write in your introduction that the reason for the book is so you can make each day count, which of course I thought of right away because of this legacy podcast, making our lives count from here on out, legacy living. How can a guided journal help us live a legacy life?
Well, the
Kind of a
whole,
big question.
right. So that's a great question. That's toward the very end. I have a section called Me and My Future. And
Mm,
so you really think about what your future, what you want your future looking here on out, and also me and my present. So as you've gone through this whole journey of thinking through your past and thinking through the people who have intersected your life and who have influenced you for better or for worse, then you have all of that information to help you decide what do I want life to look like here on out. And so in the, the dreaming section is a part of that. You get to make some vows at the very end, like these are three things I'm going to do to improve my mind. These are three things I'm going to do to be better in relationships. And you've gotten hints of that on the previous pages when you've talked about conflicts with
mm,
people and when you've thought through healthy relationships. These are the three things I'm going to do to draw closer to God. These are three things I'm going to do to live healthier with my body and to accept myself and to offer grace. So you make all these vows, and you're kind of like charting forward a plan in multiple areas of your life. And I think you're absolutely right. It really does then come down to legacy.
right. Why did you include a whole section on money? I found that curious.
Yeah, I think that we make a lot of decisions, and there's a lot of things that we can't do because of financial matters or how we view money. And my goal with this book was to touch as many aspects of a person's life as possible. I don't have huge financial problems or constraints, but I know that some people do. I know that
Mhm,
some people have like overspending problems, or some people carrying a lot of credit, or some people are pinching pennies, or some people just don't want to spend money on anything because they're afraid. And so I don't make any judgments about the way that people approach those pages. I expect people of all of those different areas to come to those pages and be able to think about, like, this is my relationship with money and how it's influencing my life.
mm,
Just in the same way that you, on previous pages, you talked about how people were influencing your life and how
mm,
your past was influencing your life today. Money is a huge issue for people. And there's never like any kind of judgment on what people's answers are. I don't come around after you fill out a section and say, okay, Sue,
mhm,
now you must know that this is the way you should think, or you should believe this because this is in the Bible. I
mhm,
let God can make space for that with you. Nobody who picks this book up is going to feel judged
right.
or that they can't say that thing. I have questions in there, yes, about money and how you feel about it, but I have sections in there like this. These are things that I don't believe about God anymore,
Mhm,
and or these are things I don't believe are true anymore. Well, just write it down. Like, I'm
mhm,
not going to come around on the backside on the next page and tell you how you need to trust God.
mm.
That's up to you and God. So I feel like it's a very non-judgmental book that just encompasses the whole human experience.
Well, I think you answered my next two questions. One is your hope that your book will help us know ourselves better or accept ourselves more easily or grow into better people? And I would say all three.
Yes, yes, and yes. You got it, Sue. That's right.
And is it to be a change agent for your readers
If that's where
if they allow it?
Yeah, if that's where they're going with it, if that's
Mhm.
it, I think the depth that you're willing to go is
Yeah.
the fruit that you'll see on the other side. So
Yeah.
that's my hope, I think, as authors, and I know you know because you're an author and you're doing this. We do what we do because we hope it produces real life change for people. So yes, that is my hope, but ultimately it will be up to the people who use it.
Um, could it be used in a group setting or no?
I think so. I've been encouraging that with women's groups, not so much like, I mean, it doesn't have to be a Bible study. I'm talking like girls' night out type stuff.
Yeah.
Like, your wine event that you have.
Hmm.
This would be the kind of thing that you could pull out and ask questions. There's some questions that probably aren't going to be fitting for
A
a
group.
big group setting, but I know spouses that are going through it together.
Oh, wow.
I
That's
know
great.
families on summer vacations are doing it together. I talked to a young couple. They just both finished their freshman year in college, a young man and a young woman who are madly in love, and they're going through it together
So
as
cute.
part of their dating. So it's like it's amazing. Some moms are doing it with their daughters. Uh, a guy in eastern Iowa bought it for all of the staff at a homeless shelter over there. I mean,
Wow.
it's really, really cool how it's being used out in the
Wow.
world.
Really, really great. What two things did you learn about Jennifer by writing the book?
Well, one was the what I had mentioned a little bit earlier about having compassion toward my younger self.
Hmm.
That's definitely one because I now admire some things about younger Jennifer that I didn't really see or appreciate until I've gone through the journal myself. And the second thing is how far I have yet to go
Hmm.
with courageous honesty when it comes
Wow.
to being real with God. I have come a long way, but there is still a lot of room to grow.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm reading through the Bible. One of those, Bibles that are set up where you do the Old Testament, New Testament, and everything. And I just have these questions like, what did you mean by that? And
I
what
love
is it?
that.
And why is it in the Bible? My margins are not um, big enough. I think we can get stuck too long by looking too long and too hard at our past at times. And I know you know that we're not supposed to be navel gazing the rest of our lives. We're supposed to seek God first, set our minds on things above, all the things that we're supposed to be doing. Explain what you mean by holes in gardens.
Okay. So there's a section in the past
Right.
that you're talking about me in my past, and the first bit of that asks the person to imagine their life as a patch of earth, which of course, because I'm a farmer's wife, I'm always going to go for the land metaphors, and to imagine that if your life were a patch of earth, that you would see holes and you would see gardens. And so holes are the things that pockmark the soil of your life. Like when you go out in your yard, or at least when I go out in my yard, sometimes I'll hit a little dip
Yeah.
in the yard, and you can't always see it. And so some of the holes in the patch of earth maybe are from real pain that
Hmm.
in your life, or something that was happened to you. They're wounds inflicted on you. They're in the soil of our heart, right? And so there's other things in our soil too, and those are gardens, and the gardens are the places where good memories have grown, and where how you will see that you were blooming in places that you didn't even realize, or
Hmm.
how that became such an important part of you, or a fun part of your past. So that whole exploration is permission to just say, hey, look, we've all got gardens that are beautiful things in our past, but we all have holes, and now we're going to go on a journey and take a look at them both. But I
Hmm.
really, really wanted to balance it out
Yeah,
with the
I love that.
gardens. I want people to see the gardens.
Yeah, I think women in particular are so guilt ridden. As soon as the baby comes out of the birth canal, we start feeling guilty about something. Their feet are too cold. We don't really know what we're doing. And then that gets fed by people's criticism as well. But our self critiquing mechanism, my girlfriend calls it her bad girlfriend in her head.
Mm,
And so those are the holes that are there, and they need to be filled up with compassion, both by us and also knowing that God loves us
absolutely.
so much. Is there this question I had right at the beginning when I started going through it? Is there
Mhm.
a right or wrong progression?
No, I have it the way I have it for a reason. I think it makes the most sense to
Okay.
follow page by page, but I have a note in there to the reader to choose your adventure,
Hmm.
and also to skip pages that are just too hard. My hope is that
Mm,
people will answer the
hard questions.
each of the hard questions, and at least come back to them. But if you're just stuck, just move on to another page, or go flip through and find one of the pages that has silly things like, would you survive a zombie apocalypse, that kind of
Mhm.
silly stuff that I think is just fun.
Well, I like the happiness bingo. I might use that.
That's great.
Print
I
that
love
off.
that.
Yeah. So, as you know, I always ask about legacy. You've talked a lot about it already. Does this book fit into a legacy that you want to be leaving for those who know and love you?
Yes, I think that the actual I don't know that I want to have my family read it, the one that's the most honest version, but there's so much in it that I almost want to like fill out another version of it, that I can just tell them some things like about my childhood, about the things where places I've suffered in my life and places I've grown. I think it's really important to be as honest as I can with my family in that legacy. But the thing that I wanted to share about legacy is actually not related to the journal, Sue. But
Okay.
maybe I've shared this with you when I've been on in the past. But um, it's journaling inside of a Bible. I have been creating legacy Bibles for both of my girls. One
Oh,
daughter already has her Bible because I read through it in a year, and now I'm working on Anna's Bible. But I go through the Bible in a year. Anna's is taking 2 years. And I go through every page, and on every page of scripture, I find something that I want them to know about the character of God, or giving them permission to ask God questions. I put silly things in the margins, reflections or ways that God is speaking to me, or how much something means to me in scripture that I hope that they never forget. So everything is specific to my children, so that when I'm gone, they can flip through that Bible and see how precious his word was to me and how precious they were to me as
and
well.
how did you find a Bible that had that much space?
I just got a regular from Dayspring. I just got a regular ESV journaling Bible. It's not a ton of space, but I just write like one thing, one paragraph, one short paragraph per page. So
Wow.
yeah.
And did you give the first Bible to your daughter already? Or are
Mhm.
you waiting till you die?
I gave it to her already.
Oh, okay.
And the other daughter knows that I'm
I'm working on
working
it.
on hers. Yep.
What a gift. I remember you telling that story. It is so good. Why is one taking 2 years?
Because it's just taking me longer to get through the Bible.
Okay.
I
Okay.
wanted to spend more time
Yeah.
with it. I
Hmm.
don't want to just set like, oh, I got to do this in a year so that God loves me.
No,
I'm just like, take 2 years this time. It's
it's,
just taking
it's,
longer.
I have you, when you've told that story to your friends, have they taken up the gauntlet? Or are they doing it
Oh
as well?
yeah, lots of people have.
So
Many people
great.
have started to do legacy Bibles. I've written about it extensively. I can probably send you a link if you want to put one in your show notes
Yeah, I sure
on how
would.
to put together a legacy Bible.
Hmm. How does your life embody God's welcoming heart? That's my last question.
Well, I sure hope it does. That is the vocationally, it's why I do what I do. It's why I show up on social media every day and post something that brings people encouragement or hope. It's why I serve on Sundays in my little country church. It's what motivates me to work on mission for God. And it's why I work with authors, welcoming them to the editor table, so to speak. And um, yeah, I hope that I embody that, and
Mm.
that God continues to grow me in that area.
Well, God is all about invitation, and I'm glad that He invited you into my life, and this has been such a blessing. Would you like to give away a copy of your latest book, The Journal,
Absolutely.
to my listeners? I didn't ask you in advance, so I'm hoping you would say yes.
Of
Yay!
course.
Okay, if you would just comment on the Instagram this week, it'll go for a whole week, and or send me an email if you're not on Instagram, and we'll put your name in the hat. Thank you so much, Jennifer. What a blessing you are.
Thank you.